Hi all. This is an unusual one for me, and I get customers from 2 or 3 main places. The first one is YouTube, and customers who come through YouTube have usually watched my videos some length of, if they've watched for a period of time. So they know what I do, and they have, by the time they've watched something, they've decided that they want me to do their guitar for them. Then I get some customers through Facebook, people who get to know me over time and decide they'd like me to do a certain thing for them. And then a growing source of customers of a different kind is coming from Google now. Since a year or 2 ago, I put claimed my Google business whatever page, and I just filled in all the stuff as you do, and then, wow, there's some damage on this guitar. Anyway, filled it all in, and what it means now is that I get some customers who look for something like guitar fixing in this area, and they get back my thingy business as a result. So this lady's brought or come through that third thing. So she's got a daughter who has an electric guitar, this one, and she's looked up guitar fixing or guitar shop or whatever local to here, and it's come up with Reloved Guitars. Now, of course, this is a different sort of creature to what I normally do, in the sense that it's not somebody who is a sort of experienced player who's looking for something, final touch for their guitar. It's somebody who's looking for something, a fix or a change of strings or some very specific thing. And so it's a kind of very different thing altogether. And so when I get the guitar, I have to make a decision on this. Obviously, unlike a YouTube customer who is of a certain age and experience, usually, not altogether, but often of a certain age group, my target market, and they're willing to pay the price I charge for precision fret leveling and all the setup parts that go with it, for a very low, light, choke-free action. This customer, for example, wouldn't want to spend that, and wouldn't know what's possible anyway, because they're not coming from the same kind of angle. And so as a result, we have to make a decision on what can I do for her and her daughter, which doesn't end up costing a ton of money, and is within the sort of just feasible zone, because another guitar like this you could have for 50-60 pounds or 70 quid, something like that, new, and how much do you spend putting this one right if it's worth it. So I think the first thing to do is just kind of go around and look at what are the showstopper problems on this guitar. So obviously, just a quick whiz. First thing I can tell you is the switch has dropped off, so the screws have come undone. I don't know whether it works or not. The jack is some way loose, a little bit. I have no idea if the pots work. We've got a string missing. One of these saddles is yanked way back tight, so I don't know if that's broken. We've got 2 chunks of wood missing on the side of the fingerboard, as you can probably, you can't see very well there, but you see better there if I could focus. So there's a whole chunk missing, and as a result the frets are sticking out. And then there's another one over here doing pretty much the same. I don't know whether it's been hacked or carved or whatever. We've got a plastic nut, we've got loose tuners, we've got some loose strap buttons. That's not the end of the world. We've got a split of some sort in the neck. I don't think it's a cut. I think it's a worrying. Well, I hope it's a cut. I'll try sounding it and see what we're left with. We've got some knife work being done on here by the looks of it. I'll try and get this zoomed in correctly. Yeah, some knife work on the edge of the guitar. That could be there for a cut. And then down here we've got a screw that just doesn't go in. It looks very wonky and bent and probably about to break off. We've got plate here that's falling apart, broken at the end. So here's the question: how do I put this right for this lady, such that I don't say to her, look, I tell you what, why don't you go and buy a new guitar, because you know it's going to end up costing you nearly the price of it. But the thing is, as you know, another guitar of this type would still need the same or some setup work, and well, we've got this one, presumably her daughter knows it. So I think the question is I'll have to set a timer on this, right? So let's see, and in a way I'm not going to charge the lady for some of the time on this, because I'm sort of interested in, and I guess maybe some of you are too, in what is, you know, what sort of what's involved and what can we do for the smallest amount of time and a feasible amount of money. So if I'm going to start now, just we're in the, oh, hang on, this is start again. Okay. How does this work? I just want to go again. There's a timer counting back, is it? Stopwatch, isn't that what I want? Yeah, okay, stopwatch is running. So in evaluating this, what do I think I can do? Well, we're going to need to fix that to make it work, otherwise it's not an electric guitar. We're going to need to put new strings on, that's cool. The bridge looks solid. I don't think it's being used, well, it's not being used as a tremolo. The neck is potentially something wrong there. I think we need to get that off. So let's sort of dive in as we mean to continue. You know, what wouldn't I be happy giving the guitar back like? And first thing I would want to do is I'm going to take off these strings. So let's just crack straight into it. Now it might seem like taking the guitar apart completely might seem like a hell of a big deal. But I think in this case, I could probably put it back together in a really short, I can put it back together in a really short space of time. We're not going to do any fret leveling. That would just be prohibitively expensive for this lady and her daughter. But of course, I do want this to be able to go back to her playing a lot better. You know, if I'm going to charge her, let's say, hopefully maybe, you know, the absolute tops would be 70 quid. I'm thinking a couple of hours of expertise and effort. And so, you know, I'm just kind of keeping an eye on that. So I want it to be tangible 70 quid's worth of difference. Now, I know that I can probably get that by making it work, so fixing the switch that's broken. That's the first thing we want to do. Maybe finding a replacement plate for this. Getting the neck sorted out. Okay, all of that sort of in place. Yuck, it's not brilliant. It sort of looks like that. I took the back off first of all to get the strings out. These strings are filthy and old, and I want to get them off before I do anything else. Certainly I don't want to play it or... If I was going to do fret leveling on this, I would leave the strings on, but right now that's not important. Okay, so I'm going to take the neck off if I can and make sure we've got something workable with the neck fittings. Now, I'm sort of half expecting one of these neck screws to break, since they're not fully in anyway. So those of you who play guitar will probably be thinking like me, is what the heck do we do with these fingerboard chunks missing? So I'm taking out the neck screws. Actually, none of them are too bent, so that one maybe just wasn't put in correctly. So now we're going to take off, I'm going to throw these dirty strings away. We're going to take off the scratch plate and have a look and check and see whether there's anything about that switch that's actually broken, or whether it's just fallen down and we have to find some more screws. So let's take that off first. Having taken the scratch plate off, when we've taken it off, then I can do some other checks and we can clean up a lot better as well. So what I'm going to do is, once I've taken these screws off, I'm going to get a jack and an amp plugged in, and I'm going to test to see whether, even though the switch is disconnected from the scratch plate, make sure that it actually works, and or whether we need to replace the switch. So all of this is kind of good old housekeeping stuff. So I can have a quick look under here. The switch has come off, so maybe somebody's just undone. Woo, okay. We've got the classic, this has happened before. I've seen this before in cheap guitars. I don't know whether the person's done this, but there are no, well, some of them have springs and some of them don't have springs, and then there are spare springs kicking about attached to the magnet. So why on earth that's happened, but some of them look like we may need to reconnect them, like that one, and the neck one, the middle one, and the bridge one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've got all the springs, just only 2 of them are actually on the pickups, so that's a bit odd. But that won't stop me right now doing the test to make sure and see if it plays, or whether we've actually got a breakage here. Sorry about the view, just trying to get everything in. Obviously this is a low production values video. You may be surprised to hear. Low production values, moi. Let's get a, no, not a high gain one, let's just have the clean one. All right, stand by. I mean, we could be lucky, it could all be connected. All right. Right, full on. Oh. Right, that would help though, get the switch in the right place. All right. Good. Well, it's very loose. Okay, so good news is the electrics are working. There's nothing weird or wonderful about that. So we need now to find some machine screws, effectively, what are we going to do to hang the switch from. I've got a box of such parts here. I'm going to borrow a couple from here. It's very difficult to get one's fingers into there. And these may or may not be the best type, but we shall, the most important thing, we shall see if they fit first of all, which would be good. Difficult to hold on to. Put this back to no talk at all, no talking in class. So I'm going to just see if we can put them through there, but not through the hole in the thing. It's not a good fit. Fine. Try and find some other ones. There's a few kicking around in here. A little small one. That's a very small one. But I'll end up having to push everything out. Right, there's 2 little ones here, same size. These might be the ones. So it's a bit of a hit and miss thing when you haven't got the originals. You have to find something that will do the job. There we go. That's that one done. This will put everything right. Lovely. Second torque on and do it up nice and tightly. Now while I've got the back off, just for the sake of everything, I'm going to take care and tighten up the pots. Now, of the things that will go wrong on a youngster's electric guitar, the bits that get handled will always be the vulnerable parts. This doesn't want to do it. I should probably lock that down again. hold on tight. Yeah, it's the bits that move, like the jack socket and the switch, as you saw, and the pot. So this thing's getting worn out now. It's not grabbing quite as it used to. But yes, all of those things are likely to be the things that go wrong. So I'm going to take these off and I'm going to retighten the, come on, get under there, retighten the jack socket as well. It's lost it's got a bit dull or blunt or something. It doesn't want to grab underneath anymore. So I can clean under here while I take these off, and usually what's under here is a bunch of nasty cellophane. You probably do better off having a close-up look. A bunch of horrible cellophane. Yeah, you can see, I think. So that makes a horrible sort of scrunching noise as the user plays and operates the knob, and it's just the way that the thing is designed. This isn't sharp enough to cut through that. So those of you who play are probably understand that my main worry right now is still the chunks on the side of the fingerboard, because they're making it pretty much unplayable at this point in time, and I'm trying to think of a feasible way to repair them. It's not going to be feasible to use a piece of wood on either side to cut out a chunk of wood, because you'd either have to pull out 2 frets and stick the well, create a new slot and somehow fix them back in. That would be really difficult. Or what else could we do? Well, we could insert a chunk, and then that doesn't go quite up to the fret, and then we could sort of fill the remaining bit under the fret crown with some putty of some sort, like I've got over somewhere out of the way at the moment, but that would be a kind of artificial wood. And actually I haven't got a dark one at the moment, I've only got a light coloured one, but if we need to use it, we'll use it. But much as I'd like to install a proper rosewood chunk, I don't really think we can warrant the time and the cost, and that's, you know, that's my concern. But I still have to make it smooth it out and de-sharpen it for the owner of this guitar, because she doesn't want to be hurting her fingers playing the guitar, and that's one aspect of it that will make it, that will put a stop to wanting to play it. So what I'm going to do right now is, while I'm holding these pots one by one, I'm just going to tighten them up, or use the adjustable spanner. They're actually pretty tight as it is, but just in case, I was going to just be ready to tighten them some more so that they don't come apart. Now, when you tighten them and you end up holding them, you just got to keep an eye out for whether anything's moved in the process. So that one, well, it doesn't want to come. I'm going to cut off a little bit of excess wire here that runs a small risk of contacting where we don't want it to contact. And make sure that after having turned and moved the pots, nothing there is looking like it's touching where it shouldn't do. In fact, that one probably might just. So let's get that off to one side and this one out of the way. There's a gap between those two. It's just one of the little details that you can get wrong when you make a little bit of adjustment like this, because you go in and hold the thing in order to tighten it up. Okay, so you can see what's in there. It's just some empty cutouts in the wood with wiring that goes through. There's no shielding on this, but I am not really able to do that for a very small amount of money. So what I'm going to do is just lift up that again and dust and wipe underneath there. So a lot of this will be tidying up, cleaning up, and kind of resetting what's already there, like the bridge and so on, and the switch that we've just done there, and tightening up that. So first of all, I'm going to put these back in. Now I'm using a power driver here, but I'm being very careful to hold the screw up before I start turning, because it's very easy when the screw's on its point that it will fall over sideways, and usually what will happen is your screwdriver tip will dig into the finish or the scratch plate or whatever. And okay, it's not a big deal on an old budget guitar like this, but it's a massive deal on somebody else's favourite. What's it? Now I'm looking at this. This is set as a hard tail, and I'm going to assume it's set there because I don't think it's good enough quality, and we won't be changing the nut out for this price of work. So I think we have to assume that either it's not. But what we could do, we could give the owner back some downward tremolo travel if we have a spare arm, and that's a sort of an extra little freebie if we've got one that even fits. I don't actually know about that just yet, but should we have one that fits, if we do, I don't know, then we could give her back oh crikey, a little bit of movement, but it's never going to happen under that circumstances. And what's also problematic is if it's too close to the scratch plate. Now that would require taking that off and manhandling, sort of cutting some out of there. So I think for a learner, this is turning that back into a tremolo is a step too far. It's obviously come without one, and I think not a learner, but as a a young guitar player, I think having a guitar that stays in tune first of all is probably the best option, really. Let's push this one back out because it's doing nobody any good all the way out there. So it's the guitar is by default set as a hardtail, and again I'm sort of assuming because it keeps it stable enough to play. Right now, oh sorry, terrible camera work. Right now I'm just resetting the saddles to a kind of normal intonation pattern, ready for when I put some new strings on. Right now they're all out of sequence a bit, and they should be, or when all's said and done happily, they should be in 2 groups of 3, which we will end up with. We'll also discover at some point whether the little grub screws for raising and lowering them are actually working, or whether they're kind of cream crackered, but we shall see. So that's in its sort of proper-ish position. We know that all this works. Let's rotate the knobs around to a same position, and let's refit volume first, 2 tones, and we'll get them all in the same orientation. I don't know if there's a correct one in all the proper fenders or whatever, but whatever it is, I like to just keep them all in the same, so the one always starts up here. That's just my thing. Right, that's that bit cleaned. I'm gonna, while I'm here, I'm just going to throw some more of this naphtha solvent onto the guitar and give it a clean over. Now this is if it's always good to do this if it's lived in, I don't know, maybe it was bought from somewhere and it's had a smoky room type of existence beforehand, and this is just a nice way to clean off that previous grime, so it's got a little bit of a fresher start. And again, what are we on, 17 minutes? You know, if you're clocking it at my rate of currently 35 quid per hour, which is probably a very small rate for skilled blah blah blah, but anyway, you know, in the world of hourly rates, it's okay for me. It works with what I'm doing. So we're you know, 17 quid in the hole, as I would say, for this work. Now we've got to take this out now and tighten up the jack socket, which we know is working because we got it playing, or we've got the pickups making a signal, making a noise. So we've got a very basic one, but it's moving. Now what I'm going to do is bit of a naughty thing here. I'm going to put some very low strength thread lock on there, because this is the thing that comes apart most on any teenager's electric guitar, and it's the bit that will cancel the fun as soon as it happens, because it will always kind of, as soon as this starts spinning, the solder joints will come loose, and as a result you will get it shutting down the sound. Nothing will come out. Oop, it's a bit too bent over too far. So before I put it back together again, I'm going to put some low strength thread lock onto this bit here. Now, even low strength is actually quite hard to get off. And when you put it back together again, by the way, put the longest tip part, put the long tip, I'm trying to get you so you can see it. Put the long tip part downwards towards the bottom of the cavity, the electrics cavity it's going to go back into. So then I will see if I can refit this. I don't know whether it's got any of that stuff on it. Did I get any of that stuff? It seems to have put it on, but it seems to have come off. Let's try it again. May have to do it once it's on the outside, but come on. All right, that should get some on the nut. So we put the nut back on. It's very fiddly, this. It's not an easy way to do this, but get it on, and then I'm going to carefully wind it on, screw it on, thread it on, turn it on, screw it up until it tightens. And then I'm going to get a cloth and hold on tight and turn it with a handful of grab so it's in the right position. The contacts, or the connections, are currently threaded and soldered quite nicely. I'm going to put a bit of grip onto that. Now that's strong enough to hold it anyway, but with the little bit of thread lock extra, that's going to stay in there and never move again. And actually, if you came to replace it, it would probably be a bit of a struggle, but it's better than that it's that than it coming apart later on and not working properly. Now I've got a loose strap button here, so I'm just going to zoom out, see if you can keep an eye on what I'm doing. Ta-da! Right, loose strap button, stay there. So I'm just going to put this up on the bench, and I'm going to just, not with this, I'm going to attempt to just tighten it up into its original wood, and I hope that it doesn't need a fresh piece of timber filling in, which is easy to do, but it takes a little bit of extra time. Yeah, it's okay, it's not brilliant, it'll do. Right, so that's the guitar body and the electrics. Now I know they're working. I also know that we're not going to use this as a tremolo, so I'm going to see if I got any plate covers that will do better than that one. I mean, well, who knows? They're all different sizes. That's what you always get, different size pieces. Nothing ever lines up with anything else. Well, so that, I think it could be in fact that's a left-handed one. Can you believe it? Oh, that's kind of nice. Did I make that myself? It's got no holes in it at all. So none of these actually line up. That's the amazing thing. But they would all kind of do the job. What you really want on a hardtail guitar like this, you basically want a cover that will cover it over and do the job. The problem with this, we can reuse this one, but it's just a shame that it's broken already. But I don't have one that fits, and to put another one on would require drilling holes. So again, we're talking about more time and more cost. So let's not do it. It's not a critical thing. Oh, do you know what I forgot to do? Silly me. Let's put this back on. I forgot to do the springs on the pickups, which we need to do because they're not supposed to be loose floating around. So we'll do that. It's just a fiddle around, really. That's all it is. Now, I'm fairly happy about the state of the. Look at that. I'm short by one screw. That's okay. I've got plenty more. Yeah, I'm confident that the neck screws will go in okay. What I just don't know is how we're going to fix that fingerboard edge yet. Oh, come on, see that? That's now not going in for some reason. There it is. Thank you. So we're back where we were with that same old one. Again, it's only to cover up that area. Now I'm going to undo all of these again and redo the pickups. My mistake. So a little bit of, if we were playing chess here, I'd stop the clock. I'm going to chuck that one away, it's rusted. We'll put a new one in, just because we can. So in it of itself, there's nothing wrong with the bridge saddles as they are. They're just perfectly adequate, cheap, mass-produced Chinese stuff, which of course all of this guitar is. And the thing is, as those of you who know my channel will know, cheap and Chinese is absolutely no reason why a guitar should be bad to play. So the idea is to, I like to take guitars that are cheap and Chinese and cheap and cheerful and do some setup work to make them play really well. In a sense, the slight problem with this is that the kind of setup work I normally do with guitars will be too expensive or not really that viable, financially viable for this one. So I'm trying to do the best I can for it, take care of the most important things for the least amount of monies. Oh, now look, I was misleading you. We're now at about the 17 quid mark. I'll take some, okay, somehow I seem to be pulling out a piece of tie clip thing, whatever it's called, clip, you know the one I mean. So now I'm going to have to take this one off first, stick the spring on it. So the spring wants to be between the scratch plate and the lug part of the pickup, and that's how it lets you adjust the height of the pickup. So the spring keeps it from falling back down if you try to raise it up, and so that's why it's necessary that all 6, 2 on each pickup, are in place. So I'm just going back through this now and reinstalling them. How they got taken off and by whom, it doesn't really matter now, it's history. So I'm just putting it back to how it should have been, or should be. And then you can adjust the height then. And we can come back to that aspect of the guitar a little bit later. Okay, so that's redone that. Now we've got to get these through the middle, those wires and those wires tucked in there. Not the easiest thing to make sure. We'll get a couple of new ones out here. And we'll go back and put all of these on. And then we'll be done with that, and then we can think about the fingerboard edge conundrum. Now this is overhanging here quite a lot, and quite frankly, if I were trying to play this thing, I would be struggling. It may block the neck, and that may be something to do with the neck not fitting properly. So I'm going to just reduce it a little bit. See if I can just do it nearly. Okay, it's it's not microscopically parallel, perfect and whatever, but you know, we're on a timer here, as you know, so I'm moving it out the way so that it won't obstruct the neck, and that the neck will sit where it should do. Now, I'm also looking at this, but we're not going to make it play as a tremolo, so I'm not going to worry about that. So now pushed back, it's pretty flat. So I want this to be flush with the edge, so that when I put the neck back in, the neck sits and isn't obstructed by the where's all the most useful blades gone. Anyway, so I'm just going to uncover this blade so I can use it. Scraper. There we go. So once I've done a little bit of drum sanding there, but I can then come back to here and scrape along the edge of this to tidy it up a bit, but also make sure it's totally flush with the wood. That should be all right. Now, let's put the rest of the screws back in. And once I've done that, I'll move this off to one side and we'll concentrate on the frets and the neck. Now, what am I not going to do? I'm not going to level the frets. So the thing that I can do most of is to fix the thing that obviously stops this playing, which is the switch falling through. So we've done that. The next thing I can do is to check the rest of the electrics, make sure they work. Done that. Next thing I can do is to clean the neck, to clean the fingerboard, check it over, and do what I can to fix the big gouges. And like I said, that's an interesting one because it sort of seems to suggest either some inserts or some resin or something like that. So there we have a working body with a bit cleaned up. I'm just going to stand this here in the background while we focus on the neck part. So here is the neck. Now as far as the neck goes, I'm going to clean it, be a definite, with some naphtha. There's my blade that I wanted. I'm going to clean it with some naphtha. Zoom in on the neck. Just going to make sure this nut, little tag on the end of the nut's out of the way. Now I probably can file those down to the right sort of height. Now what we've got is we've got some loose screws on the back of here, which is making the, what to call them, tuners wobble. Now these tuners are cheap, nasty Chinese tuners, right? But as I've said loads of times before, weirdly they're no relation on keeping your guitar in tune, right? Although it sounds really weird. You obviously use them to get your guitar into tune, but whether or not it stays in tune has nothing to do with the tuners. They only get the guitar into tune, and if you have more expensive ones, you get better gearing, better materials, and they're smoother and look nicer, and that does have an impact. You know, it's a nicer experience, and it'll tune your guitar up nice and smooth. It feels good and looks good, but it won't do any more keeping your guitar in tune than any other kind. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to tighten these up as much as I can to make sure, well, they will tighten up a bit. Just make sure they're as tight as possible. They're not perfectly aligned at the best of times, but we just want them to stay still. Now, the thing that will hold them still, really, isn't this, aren't these screws really, it's the nut on the other side. So I'm kind of tightening these up just to hold the tuners in the right position to begin with, and then doing that as tight as I can. But switching over to a, what do they call it? I've forgotten the word for it. It's got a proper word. The thing for doing up the thing. So this has got a chunk of wood caught under it, which I'm going to get rid of. But I'm going to box spanner, that's what they call it. So I'm going to do these up now, nice and tight with this box spanner, and that is what will keep the tuners in place and stop them moving around. And they've come loose over time, which they always do. They come loose partly because as the guitar ages, it usually dries out a little bit, and as a result, what was tight at the start becomes loose. But now they're all tightened up, they won't hardly move anywhere. Right, let's do the thing I said we'd do, which is clean the fingerboard a bit. And along with that, I'm not going to do any clever, time-intensive polishing, but what we can do is we can give the frets a going over with some wire wool, which will bring them up and shine them up nicely. It's not going to level them, and so the playability or the ultimate action of this guitar will be dictated by how uneven any frets are in this fingerboard. And the thing is, there always are some uneven frets on every guitar. It's not a bad thing or any sign of really bad quality or anything. It's just inherent in guitar making, especially in factory mass production, because the way frets are put on is quite crude. You know, you just press them in or tap them in, and because it's manual, any slight they can slightly stand up proud a little bit. Not so much that you'd see it, but enough for you to pick it up when you're doing fret leveling. So I'm just going to get some steel wool onto these frets. Now I'm obviously also touching the fingerboard, and if I like, I can give it a kind of rub down at the same time, just so it doesn't end up just leaving a sort of slightly matte looking patch where the frets lie. So it probably just makes sense to run straight down the wood onto the fret, but it's only a very kind of minor what's the word, grit or scratchiness. So again, not massively long-winded, a little bit fiddly, but you know, we're still only 36 minutes into a resuscitation of this. Now as I'm doing this, I'm kind of glancing at this, seeing what we can do. The first thing that strikes me is we could just round off all the overhanging unsupported frets, so that we take down the sort of overhanging bits and remove the bits that can hit your hand and cause discomfort. But I will only do that if, by doing so, we're not shortening or causing the strings to come anywhere too close to the edge. But if it's doable, then we can use that as a way out. We just want to make it playable so it won't cut the owner's fingers, and yeah, it'll just be a better playing experience. So it's either fill or grind back, I suppose you could say, or sand back, grind back, file back. So all the frets starting to look a bit brighter now with the wire wool. Was good stuff to have around for livening the frets back up. So it goes from being horribly dull and tarnished to being like you play it every day. Oh dear. A lady who brought the guitar over today, bless her, she came to our close and parked quite away from the house, and first of all had to come out in the pouring rain to knock on doors and find which was the right house. And it wasn't the owner's mum, it was a friend of hers, work friend, but she had to come out in the rain, and then once she found it was the right house, poor thing had to go back in the rain to get the guitar. So well done, and thank you for the effort. Right, now let's have a look. Okay, so we've shined up the frets, and everything's looking a bit cleaner in this neck department. We've got a scratch here, which I think is not actually a split. I thought to begin with it might have been a split, but I think it's more of a gouge with a knife, maybe something that was used for the carving there. So although this is picking off some finish, we can just give it a sort of smooth down there, and although it's a big scratch, I can't feel it now, so that's kind of improved its playability a bit. Right, see now, let's have a close-up look. Now if we're going to, where are we? There's my finger there. Okay, so you can see how this one overhangs. There's a sort of overhanging bit there. We can't really put a piece of wood in here that will save that. We could, we could cut a chunk out, a slot, a rectangle, and fit it in there, chisel out a piece, fit a new piece in, but we still wouldn't really get it to grip the tang, the downward bit of the fret. So my feeling is we could either soften this off, or I'm going to, since we've got this putty, I think we should put it to use, and providing it sets hard, we can shape it, and it may not look like the greatest thing on earth, but we want it to get up underneath this sharp corner of this fret, because to kind of re-grind this away, you've lost quite a bit of the playing space on the guitar. So I'm going to put this back together to see, because we will need strings to make some assessments of how well it's going to work. So I'm going to reinstall the neck, having moved away the plastic so it can fit in here anywhere it needs to fit. Sorry about the view, terrible. This is, the neck joint on this is very loose, which is bad in one way, good in another. It's good in the sense that when you have a loose neck joint, you can, you've got a lot of option to, here's something I don't like. You've got a lot of option to reposition the neck when you need to. Now these holes are too small. The thing you don't need, the factories often do this, the thing you don't need when you're fitting your neck to the body is, you absolutely don't want the screws you put in to be gripping the heel as they go through. They need to pass cleanly through there and grip only into the neck itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill these out and widen them, which will make positioning the neck a little bit more accurate, and we won't be straining to get those screws in. Let's just make sure they are loose enough to begin with. No, I see it needs a little bit more than that. Let's get a slightly bigger one, 6.5, sorry, 5.5. And we'll try again. So you really want this to be loose like that. That's what you want. So 5.5 seems to be good. And there's, like I said, not only is there no advantage to having the screws biting into the wood of the pocket, which is this stuff here, it's absolutely a disadvantage. You don't want it doing that at all. You want screws to pass through freely like they're about to do now, straight to the point where they bite into the wood of the heel, nice and clean, and then we'll put all four in and tighten them up. Now when I put the strings on a bit later, I may need to loosen this off and reposition the neck a little bit, but that's okay, we can do that later on if we need to. So 2 opposing corners are done. There goes the other one, and all 4 fitted, and that actually looks a better fit than it was before. Good. Right. So, yeah, here comes the fun bit, the fitting this up. Now, how am I going to do this? I think we can't know the outcome of this tonight, but what we can do is we can get it sort of set up. We can even put the strings on and then just come back and sand it off tomorrow. Now we want to put some of this putty on, but we don't want it to stick miles out of the way. So we'll probably use some tape to press it into place, and we'll see. But the first thing I'll do is I'll put this on that hanger, and we'll get some of the putty out. Now, like I say, unfortunately, it's not the colour of. You just think I've got something else that could work. It's not really meant for it, but let's have a think. It's called burn sticks, and it's a hard resin, and when it's cold, it's pretty solid, and that would be a quick way to fill these. And then you can scrape and sand it back, and that wouldn't take overnight to figure it out. It's also the right sort of colour. So we need this to be standing up. Let's see if we can get it into a vaguely okay position. Probably need, let's get the little, what should we get? Let's get some finish. A can of the good stuff. Morel's Super Duper. What's it called? Something pre-cat lacquer. And we put it on a bit of a tilt, and that should hold everything there. Right, so I'm going to attempt to do this, as I mentioned, with the burn sticks. Can you see where we're going? Let's try and get it. I'm going to see if I can get as close up as I can to give you the best view possible. Something like that. And the attempt, I'm going to heat up the soldering iron, which is necessary for this. And I'm going to attempt to build up this, the material either side of here, and I'm going to flow it into the underneath, and it'll look messy to begin with, but don't worry. So I'm going to put some green tape on here to cover off bits I don't want it to go anywhere near. So first one will be along the line of the wood fingerboard, the rosewoody. Well, it's not really rosewood, but you know what I mean. So that's one bit, and I don't want it going past this bit here at the far end of the fret, like so. That's another one shielded off. So I'm just isolating the bit that I'm going to try and only to work with. Now this, I'm going to go back a bit from this one because I do need a little bit more of a lead up to it, so we can run the risk of spreading it over there a little bit. But I will tidy up this edge. Need a piece of metal. So where are we at? We're at 45 minutes since we started this, and got a long way. And most of the stuff is done. So I'm going to put this in here to protect, and maybe go a little bit further out. Put that in there, and I'm going to jam that in there with my thumbnail. Yes, I have a thumbnail. Okay, so I've given myself a sort of masked off area, and I'll need to do the same with the other one in a minute. And actually, I'll probably just do that while I'm waiting for the heating up of the, what's it called? That thing. Soldering iron. Now, you can't see much at the minute, so I'm just going to put this where it is. That's going to stand okay. You can probably see the other one now. There it is. Sorry about this. Terrible. Lousy camera work. Fired. So the similar approach here. Now I'm kind of hoping that this burn stick does the job, but I'm not sure it shouldn't, because it does set hard and it is a plasticky resin. So it's going to be I think it's going to be the best bet for sorting this out without waiting days for some wrong coloured material to fit. And so once we've just got this in place, we'll end up with an area that we can then scrape very carefully with blades, for example. Now, where have we gone to? There's the gap, there's the gap. So I'm just going to mark off or cover off. Cut again. So the burn stick is often used as an end filler, which is pretty useful for that. It's hard to use because it's actually quite hard to control. It goes everywhere, but in this case it's not such a bad thing, because we could probably do with more rather than less, because we know we're going to be in a careful sculpting backwards routine once we've done this. So I'm just kind of getting as much as I can cleared out of the way. Okay, then we go back to our positions, first position. Now what I'll do is I'll probably move these things out of the way slightly. I want to lean that on there, and then I'll reposition the camera. Where are we going to? There's our gap. You see it? Okay, something like that. Now I need to bring across the soldering iron, which is going to get mucky doing this because it's not really its favourite substance. Here's my burn stick. I'm going to make a stinky smoke. So I'm going to try and just first of all, clean off the solder on the iron as much as I can. Okay, smoking nicely. Right, so I'm going to aim to build this up here, and you'll probably be able to see quite clearly what goes on. It goes all blobby. So I'm blobbing it onto the wood there, and that's already gone on. And I'm sticking it on here. Now it's going to cool off fairly quickly as we go. It'll probably reheat a little bit as I put some fresh stuff on, but I would imagine we can build this up as a fill relatively quickly. And sometimes you'll get a bubble caught in it. So the question is how we build it up to get a sort of, I guess what we need is a little cofferdam would be the right sort of word. Now, this is pretty intensive stuff, but we're 51 minutes in, so we've got quite a bit of time left of my anticipated time cost, maximum cost. So if I now, let's see if I can get a tear that's accurate. If we get a little piece of tape in there like so, and then I gently lever it into the space, we've got a little thing to kind of back it up against, and if I put it up a little bit straighter, which you can still see, now my aim now will be to get some build up, and I don't care if it sticks to the tape, that's fine. I just want to fill this little backed up area now so I get myself a bit of material that I can then carve away at a later date. And in a sense, the more the merrier really. And now I have it. Now I'm going to make sure it spreads out all over the fill area. Look at that, a bit of bubbling. Now it's running downhill a little bit, so it would probably make sense to raise this up. So I'm going to stand whatever this thing is, the neck rest on there. That's leveled it out a bit, and I just want to add a tiny bit more into this end here so that I've got mostly a level playing field right up to the end. Right, that's actually pretty good going. So this thing, believe it or not, will fill out pretty quickly, or cool off pretty quickly. I mean, you could blow cold air over it. Or we could just flip over now and do the next piece. Now this one, I'm going to want to lean it towards me. Now I think the other one's set enough so it won't fall off, drip off. If it does, we'll find out the hard way. Now I'm going to need another little piece of tape, ideally cut to size, or torn to size, probably more like it, so that we can just use it when it's ready. So if I can anticipate the size, I may or may not. Damn, that's about a millimetre wrong. Let's take that little extra bit off the edge. So this is just so I can make that bulwark or cofferdam that I'm aiming to do. And this, yeah, that'll do. So I'll just stick that on the top of this thing. Sorry, wherever you are. Oh yes, where have you gone now? I was not putting you in the right place. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to start by filling up the fret end bit, which is the kind of most obvious hole. And it's going to sort of bubble into there. When you use this stuff, it does sink a little bit, especially if you're filling a fret end. You think you've got it all sorted, and then it sort of sinks and you end up putting a little bit more and a little bit more to fill it out. So now I'm sort of walking along, getting it as much as I can on there to build it up, which looks good and shiny, as you can see. But I think now is time to put my little restraining dam on. I probably need to just push this down for a minute so I can actually, that's probably what I should have done the last time. Just hold on a second. Where's it gone? There you go. You are there. What I'm going to, no, you aren't there. What are we looking at? There we are looking, this little bit here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to scrape this bit here, if I can find the blade, so that it's flat and it doesn't obstruct my little dam. So you can feel it's already solid, although I can scrape it back. So that's now leaving it possible for me to stick this on, and that will give me a little bit. I'm going to stick it over so it sticks up just that little bit, and that should give me a sort of something to pour the material into. There you go. It always looks a bit naff at this point, but it's a good way of doing things. I'm forever using that technique to get out of jail. Once you take the tape off, of course, and it's set, you just have a little sort of step, but that's fine because you can carve that back with a blade. Careful. So I'm filling that now, like the other side. It's a bit smoky, and you don't want to be bringing too much of it in, but it's hard to knot actually. That's run over the top of the dam, but it's not so bad. And it's probably melting the Gorilla Tape a little bit. So I think that's enough bulk. So I'm going to turn off the iron. Well, that's a handy attempt. Anyway, I don't know how effective it's going to be. I think it's going to work. I'm pretty sure of that. The time bit, I think, at home is going to be, or here or wherever I do it, is going to be the cleaning up and sanding back. So let's have a look at this first one, which is here. Now that is solid. So I'm going to take off my dam first, pulling it kind of away, and I can see that's filled out nicely under there. So that's that. Now I can take away my other sort of protective bits and all the way around and so on and so forth, and then we'll see what we've got. So this is now going to crack off some of the stuff that's gone on there, but it seems to have come off nicely without causing anything to break or splinter off. I think the really important bit will be the fact that we've got this, the overhanging fret now is supported. Well, it's not supported, it's filled. I wouldn't call it support as such, but can you see that there? That's not a bad little fill on the edge there. Look at that. Right now it's messy and it's like icing on a bad cake, but that's filled in, and I'll be able to sand that or scrape that back. So we're going to do the same down here, and this will crack some off the top here, I can see, but again, it's all right. It's coming off like, you know, cake icing. I mean, we don't want it to be. Now this is very slightly underfilled, so we could either add a tiny fraction more. The worry about adding this tiny fraction more is I don't want it to sort of melt the other stuff and start glooping everywhere. I'll give it a quick go at it. See if we can just raise it up. Since we know it's working, it's worth a go. We're coming up to 1 hour, so it's 35 quid's worth of work on this guitar. And we've got a lot covered in that time, I must say. So I still want this to be filled over and above where it is already. So I'm going to try and douse some more on there without melting the base that it's falling on, if you see what I mean. Come on, sucker. So I want the hot stuff, baby, to fall onto the existing stuff. I think that'll do. All right, give me a little bit more cleaning back, but I'd rather be flush to the surface and then round it off than not. Okay, so while that cools, I can take this off. And then the final, sorry about if you're not getting any view at the moment, doink. We'll take this piece off here. And that makes a clean line. Now, let's just put this over here. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you how I would prepare a blade for doing this scraping work. It's not, in a sense, it's probably not strictly necessary, but it's a good thing to practice doing. So I'll show you how I do it. This can be very handy if you're ever doing a flat surface. You're looking to scrape back a fix on a flat surface, which in a sense this is. So it may, but for this to work, ideally when you're doing fix scrapes on a flat surface, what you're really wanting is you want your blade to rest either side of the repairing or the area of trying to level off. So this won't quite work in this case because we haven't got any room this side of either of those repairs or the outside. So I'm probably just not really that important to do what I'm doing here, but I'm just doing it out of habit. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm kind of using some green tape to mask off the majority of this area, other than a small area that I'm going to use that will do the cutting or the scraping, I should say. So I just put the green tape on and then fold it over so that it protects and leaves a little bit clear. So there's only a little bit of exposed blade there. As I say, really that makes sense when you're doing a flat repaired area, but it helps me here just to perhaps not have too much of a cutting area while I'm doing this, because I'm only doing I'm trying to minimize the area. So we'll get a good look at this. I think we will, if I can get the zoom to work. Okay, we're going to do this bit here. So, okay, so I've got it's cooled off now. So the aim of what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to use the blade carefully to scrape away the material, and it's obviously doing it at a very slow rate, and it will eventually blunt the knife in this area, but I think it's better. See, this is protecting the board, so I can feel like I'm using it without doing any major damage to the board. Now this isn't the strongest material because it's only a sort of filling kind of resin, but I feel that maybe for what we're trying to do here, it may be a good solution. So I'm just sort of wearing it away, and partly what I can do is by having this longer blade, I can sort of just keep it so it's not digging over too far. I can just see it's touching the rest of the fingerboard there. So I've got to get into the corner here to level it. So the idea really is just to get this surface as close to flush with the others. Now of course the other surface is a radiused shape, and we're not going to really get that so easily with this little device. And I wouldn't worry too much about that. What we don't want is to get end up with a little ding hole. So if you need to, you could choose a different kind of sanding thing just to kind of help level it out where it looks like it's taking a dip or developing a little peak or something. And again, it's just a matter of carving the way you need to. There's no rule book on this. It's just whatever works to get you where you need to get. So I mean, it's quite brittle, but it's entirely scrapable, and we should be able to get it all down to just about where we want it. And I tend to sort of support the blade with other parts of the hand and stuff to ensure, or do my best to ensure, that the cutting surface is as flat as can be. So yes, you can see that we've got we've got something clearly on the end of there, but with luck it's going to tidy backwards. Now it's a big blob there, as you can see, but if I'm just I might actually hold this with my arm and see what you can see. So I'm going to now use the same thing. Where have we gone? I'm going to use the same thing to try and just scrape this now flush. Now this is a little bit tricky because there's nothing really to rest the blade on, so you can see I'm probably just using my fingers to get as level a scrape as possible. Now I don't really know how this resin's going to perform when it's handled a lot. It melts under soldering iron heat, but it's not designed to melt under hand temperature. It's what do they call it? A thingy stick, burn stick. So it's kind of a woodworking furniture maker's tool for filling blemishes and stuff. So I think this is a pretty big blemish. It's a structural business we're doing here, but with some careful sculpting we're going to end up with a rounded off rescued part of the fingerboard, and we can do some sandpaper on there as well when the time's right to just round it off and smooth it off. But what I'm just trying to do now is to sort of follow the basic shape of the fingerboard edge, and just we only need to try and get it as flush to that as possible. We only want to just fill any obvious holes, not build up too far anywhere. And so, the next stage is, it's always going to be the case that sanding at this point is going to be much better than any other technique, but we just have to remember that sanding is going to take some of the surrounding area with it, but sometimes there's no escaping that if you want to blend it in. So here I've got a little block of foam. It's not the rigidest, flattest thing in the world, but we can now start to blend this in to the fingerboard either side, and this will now start to be a lot more blended. Probably the right way to look at it. And once it's kind of leveled in, we can just sort of shine this up a little bit, but obviously it's taking a little bit of material. Now we can kind of run over the edge a little bit here to round this off with sandpaper. Again, better to do that with sandpaper than to carve it, probably. And then I'm just going to kind of round the edge off, and what I'll do now is I'll switch. That was 400 grit. I'm now going to switch to 1000, which is much less, but it gives us a sort of slower sanding cut. So we should be able to get it nice and smooth. You see what I'm doing here? Just off screen there. Okay, so now I'm sort of looking to very gentle cutting to bring this flush with the fingerboard so that you really wouldn't notice the feel. Now at the moment you will still be able to feel it because it's still, now I can feel like it's still standing up quite a bit. So I'm going to do a little bit more with this just to bring it to level. Again, as long as it's not sort of dug in like a trench or concavity, then that's fine. Okay, so I might switch back to 400 just for this little bit on the edge here. Okay, just trying to carefully, or be as careful as I can, and try and avoid the frets. I don't want to scuff them up too much. It won't be the end of the world, but there's no real need to get them scratched up. So getting smooth here. I'll just keep going with this 400 until I'm nearly on the mark. So I'm tilting it now towards the edge so that it brings it back as flush as I can with nothing sticking up. That's probably the most important, is we don't want anything sticking up under the fingers. So I can still feel a little bit there. So I can carry on just gently sanding or scraping, whichever you've got the patience for. The fingerboard either side should kind of help guide this so that you don't overcut. So it's kind of telling me that's about right. It's fun, this. I mean, it's fun in that it's a new one on me. I'm not really used to sculpting with resins like this, but there's no reason why it shouldn't do the job. And I'm just rounding this off now, and doing so by just scraping the ends like that. You would hardly even notice at this point. And do with a little bit of, still a little bit more sanding, but it's getting there. So I also want to make sure that there's nothing sticking under the frets at either side there. Just make sure that's clean. And then we can either carefully do the edge again with 400, and I'm just now scraping with my 400 grit and using my thumb to guide it rather than the block. And then we can switch to the finer grade with or without a block, depending on how you like to work. This seems to be running smoother now. Now this is obviously going to take some of the finish, or a little bit of the finish on the edge here, but the idea is that it's going to work as a neck better because of its it's been repaired a bit. I'm just going to use this very sharp blade here just to see if I can level this out one more time. I think so. And then let's get the 1000 grit again. So that's the first side taken care of, just about. Again, the 1000 grit is lovely and gentle. You can do a lot of work with it before it takes much away. So it's not an awful risk of spoiling anything. So now I'm basically just rounding the fix around the edge, and wow, that's smooth as anything. You wouldn't even know that was on there. So I'm going to do the same on this side. I think that's probably deep enough. I'll check case it needs. Oh no, low battery. All right, I'm going to do the rest of this while I charge the thing. Oh, and here we are. Later. Both repairs done. Can't even spot that one. Oh yeah. Much better than it was. So I'm going to call that good enough. And I've got a whole load of tools up here because I've done a couple of other guitars in the meantime since we last ran out of power together on this bench. So I'm going to now fit the strings. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fit some strings. I'm going to put 9s on because they are lighter. I should make it easier to play. So the thing I've got to do here is let's load up some strings. We're going to stick with a plastic nut just to go prove that plastic nuts aren't impossible, but they aren't perfect, and I'd rather not use them. But to keep the cost down, oh crepes, man. Let's go to my clock thing. Does it go again? Yes, carries on. Ooh. So let's go to the, I've just done some, I'm an idiot. I've just done a load of, whatever that word would be, sanding, scraping and sanding of the fixes, and I didn't time it, but that's about 15 minutes, so it should be all right. I'll just add that on at the end. Yeah, so we're not going to replace the nut with an expensive tusk one. We're going to continue to use the plastic one, but we'll make sure that it's cut wide enough so that the strings can move freely through it, so that they don't go out of tune, and give the guitar the best chance of staying in tune possible. Now, the important thing about tuning, as I said at the beginning, your tuners don't really have anything to do with it. They just help you get the guitar into tune, but keeping the guitar in tune is about two things: about getting your nut slots right, and ideally, if you can, on the next guitar, you'd want to fit a tusk nut, or I could fit a tusk nut, but that would be a better idea, and that's because it's made of a sort of friction-free material, so that helps to keep the strings from catching in the nut. But you want a good material ideally, and even if you can't get that, then we make sure that we cut the nut slots wide and free-flowing, wide enough and free-flowing on the nut that we have got, so that the strings can move as freely as possible with as little friction as possible, and that will go a long way towards keeping it in tune. Well, it'll go halfway. The other half of keeping it in tune has to do with getting all the slack out of your strings. And so when you put a bunch of strings on fresh, you actually got to do quite a bit of pulling to get them to give up all their slack. And it might be a bit boring seeming, because if you want to just get on and play, but the hard part about it is, I just get this damn strings with a hole. The hard part about it is if you don't do this stretching business, you won't get, I'm going to get my machine for this, you won't keep it in tune. So I think it's important enough that it stays in tune to do this properly, which is why I recommend it. So I'll show you how I string the guitar first. Let's look down at this end. Sorry about the terrible view, I haven't really been paying attention. So there's the headstock end. So I pull the string all the way through, right to the end, and then I pull it back by 1 fret, and I start winding it on with my winder. Or you might have a plastic handheld one, manual one. Now what I do is I make sure that oh blimey, this neck is quite a long way off being in line. So what I'm going to have to do before I do anything else, sorry, oh, terrible camera work. What I'm going to have to do before I do anything else, the neck's way out of line, so I'm going to have to loosen off the neck, and the bass string is kind of not going where we want it to. So I'm going to have to undo this and pull the neck into a bit of a better position before we put any more strings on it. So just slack these off a bit, and then I kind of bring it upwards towards me, which is where I want it to be. and then I'll lock down these two, and then I'll have a good look at the positioning. Wow, it's got quite a bit of movement. Okay, I'm going to just hold it there for a second until I get the other string on. So just bear with me, get the high E string on, and then we'll just drop this in the thing and we'll line it up so, oh God, so we can see. God, it's popped through, so you have to make sure the string ball comes all the way up. That's perfectly in line, so I'm just going to pull this back one thing, lock it on with my hands because I don't want to let go of it. So when I tighten it up, I go through all the way till it's tight, pull it all the way through, and then pull it back 1 fret's worth and hold it taut and start winding it. And as it comes round, I make sure the held string goes over the loose spare bit of string, and as it comes round the second time, I pull up the spare bit string and make sure that the held string goes underneath that one, and then just wind on until it's no more winding can be done. This is probably a bit too much I put on here. I thought it was a fret's worth, but it's clearly not. But it's not the end of the world. Right, so just as I get these two outside strings on, the two E's, I can see the positioning of the strings, and to be honest, that's about where I want it now. So I'm going to do my best to lock this down now. It's going to be kind of hard to do, or it's quite hard to keep it in place. I hope it stays in place. So lock it on quite tight, and then we'll do a little bit of manual tightening in a minute. Right, that's held it in place. So a lot of movement in the neck, which is okay. It gives us, like I said earlier on, it gives us a chance to align it properly. So once I've got the strings through and tightened, I snip them right back. I'll show you it again in a close-up. Now I've got the neck sorted. Okay, so here's what I do. I pull up the string, we're doing the A string now, and I go through the peg hole post like this, pull it all the way through, make sure the ball is up inside of the bridge part. Right, pull it all the way through, and then I grab the end, the first fret, hold it at the first fret, and I pull it back 1 fret. Don't do it then, I'm going to get hold of my tightening up tool, which will make things so much easier. Right, let's do this again. Pull it all the way through, taut, drop it in the slot, make sure it's seated properly, hold it at the first fret while it's tight, pull it back 1 fret and hold it. Then I start to wind on, and as it grabs and sort of bends a kink, then I can hold this bit and move it around. So I pick it up and I tighten it up, letting this floppy string go underneath this held one first time. Right, so there it goes round there. I keep this one taut with my fingers so it doesn't fall off it doesn't go anywhere. And I pull this loose one up and push the held one underneath the loose one for the second go round. And then I drop that string into the slot and cut it short. So that's all the string that's going to go on to the winding thing post. I'll do it again with this one, the D string. And obviously the strings go in under these string trees as well to keep them at the right angle. So tight, pull back 1 fret's worth, hold it, start winding it. Actually for this bit it's better to keep it away from the string tree, so you've got room to hold it up. Hold the tight one over the loose one, and as the loose one comes round, yank it up, out the way, and push the held one underneath. And then this time go under the string tree as well, which gets it in tidied up in place. So all of this now is coming together nicely. I think we'll be able to take this home and put it away. I think the lady will be coming for it on Friday, so that's cool. So same old thing here. Now, like I say, the important thing we've yet to do is the stretching part. And this is what I would recommend to everybody to do with every time they change strings. And it takes discipline to do it, but it will reward you with your guitar staying in tune much better. And maybe when you're new to it, it's not such a big deal, but as soon as you start playing with other people, being in tune becomes really, really important. I mean, it is anyway, but but never as much as when you're playing with other people, because the minute they're in tune or you're not, or you're both not in tune for different reasons, then it starts to sound terrible and it won't be enjoyable. Okay, so the next thing I've got, I'm going to zoom out now as we get to the end of this. Next thing I'm going to do, I've got the strings on and I'm going to lift the guitar up into a playing position, and I'm going to sort of gently tug at the strings. And I'll tell you what I forgot to do, is I forgot to put some oil on the fingerboard, but it's not really that important. It's just a visual aesthetic thing. I might do some on the edge just to mask over this these repairs. Okay, so we've got the strings flopping about, we've got them positioned down the neck the right way. I'm going to now tighten them up just a little bit. You won't have to do this, this is just while I'm setting the guitar up as best I can for you. I'm just going to try and make sure the strings are at the optimum height over at the saddles. The problem is, I think I may have mentioned before, but how low you can have this set right now. The lower it is, the easier it is to play, but how low you can go is pretty much defined by the condition of the frets under here. So we may find that we can't go below a certain level. So that's a 1.5, that's actually quite low. That's not the highest, worst action ever, but it's not great. This would, for perfection or for much better playing quality, you benefit from the frets being leveled. And if I leveled the frets on this guitar, then it would play it, you could play it at much lower action than is currently possible. But that's the same for all guitars, and it doesn't matter how much money you spend on them, the same thing applies. And you know, some of the biggest name guitars you can buy have very bad uneven frets, which prevent me setting a low action. Okay, so now I've got that roughly at the right height. Right, we've got it as good as we're going to get action-wise, I think. I'm just sort of, I've done set the heights of the strings relative to each other by eyeballing it, really. And that's because we can't really get much lower than that, so we don't really gain anything from being too precise, but it looks and feels pretty good. Now I've got that sorted, the next thing we're going to do is to stretch out these strings. So I grab the strings, this is every time you put on a new set of strings, grab the strings and I push and pull between fingers and thumb, and that will help you get the slack kind of squeezed out of the strings. And what we'll hear is this, whoops, as soon as I've done it once, the guitar will be way out of tune, and that's the way I look at it, is it's best that we put it out of tune as opposed to letting it kind of come out, or the out of tuneness or the slack to sort of bleed out in its own time. And it will do when you're playing, you know, in your room, rehearsing with friends, out and about, whatever, at a gig. It will continue to go out of tune little bit by little bit. So that retuning is how much slack I stretched that time, or the first time. Okay, and we do it again, and we put it out of tune again. If you do this, you'll get used to how hard you can squeeze the strings or push the strings to stretch them without breaking them. on a set of 9 strings, which means a set that starts with a 9/100th of an inch diameter as the top, the high E, the thinnest one. That's a bit thin, and you can, if you press too hard, you can break that one. I've got a spare over there in case I do, but it's always possible to do that. So you want to be just a little bit more careful when you're pushing and pulling that top E string. I think we'd be nearly there. So a little bit of detuning, not a ton. Okay, I'm looking at the action of the strings over the nut, and it's too high, so what we're going to do is going to set it. You don't have to do this, I'll do it once and for all. We've got about 15 minutes left maximum of the 2-hour thing. So what I'm going to do in that time is I'm going to cut down the nut slots to as low as we need to go, and that's lower than it's currently set. So I'm going to cut the the slots backwards, because they want to be leaning back, if you like, and I'm going to measure it each time I take a bit down. I'll come back and measure it, dusting out the cutaway stuff. Wow, that's handy, get the blade out there. Still some to go. So I'm going down to a 0.3 of a millimeter height, which is a height that I've discovered through years of trial and error. Makes a very good height for beginners, or everyone really, to have the action set over this first fret. And when you get that set right, the slots are wide and free running, so they don't grab the strings, so it stays in tune better. But also, because the strings are very low over the first fret, they don't go out of tune when you fret them down here, which if on many beginner guitars, the action of the strings over here set by the nut is so high that when you press down, well, that's not so good. When you press down, they go out of tune. But they're not doing that here because we're getting close to the right height, a tiny bit more. So I'm just making sure I got the right side of my file each time. And I stop when it's at the right height, which it is there, I can see. And there's the B, which is this one, and that's got to come down as well. So in the taking it down, I'm also widening it out to ensure the string moves freely. So I keep checking, make sure I got the right side of the file to use. Brush away the bits, and when we get down to the right height, check it. Almost spot on, tiny bit more. Takes quite a lot of experience to get those cuts right, because otherwise it's very easy to overcut it, and I've done that many times. This one only uses a very slight bit, so I'm going to start by widening it, and then own the tiniest of reduction in height of the front edge, still a little bit more. And once we're there, and it will play like a dream compared to how it did. Especially playing chords, so you know how playing an F chord, and that is difficult down here, around near the nut. Setting these at this action will make that so much easier. Now the bass strings aren't bad actually, they're close to where it needs to be. So I'm just going to double check. Well, a little bit of adjustment. So let's go with the 26. Again, widening first, followed by a tiny bit of lowering. Get the right side, 26. Widening, followed by a bit of lowering. So this all cuts differently. Bone cuts very differently from plastic. Plastic cuts differently from tusk. So I have to kind of reset my brain each time so as not to overcut go carefully. Nearly there. So it's worth it taking this time to do it, because once you get this height right, it really plays a big part in the guitar. Not only playing and staying in tune, but also feeling incredibly easy to play down at this end when you're fretting chords. So we're going to go to 36 here. So again, a bit of widening first, leaning backwards, widening, come on. See, plastic, see how, I don't know if you can see how it's gripping the file there. It does that to the strings as well. It's not a great material for nuts. But we can make it work providing the slots are wide enough and cut to the right height. A little bit more. What are we on? 36, 36. Right. So we'll come in on 2 hours on this little jobette. So you can see that's just on the mark. And finally on the 46, a little bit of widening and a tiny bit of lowering. So get the widening done first, and then possibly that was the lowering required. So when I put the feeler gauge underneath and you can hear the notes still ringing out, it tells me that I've still got fresh air between the string and the fret. And we want to take it down until it just starts to run out of space. Now these bigger slots are actually harder to cut, so they can take a while longer to cut, and sometimes they try to jump forward. You think you're getting there, and then it suddenly goes too far, and then you've overcut it. You're forced to use a bit more force, but I'm going to stop there. Okay, so I'm going to give it one more pull to stretch any last bit out. I'm going to do one more tune up, and then we'll just plug it in to make sure it works. And we'll be done. Right on the mark, 137 plus 15. Lovely, right, let's get the amp out. Clean tone. We don't want a lot of distortion noises. It's loud enough. Wow. Okay, bridge. Okay, just check something here. Got a dodgy fret there. Now, this fret in this situation, basically, it's not happy. It's an uneven fret. So it tells me that the fret there is sticking up. Now, normally you could you take care of it with fret leveling, and then that would allow you to have a low action. I've set the action really low, so it's no surprise that this one is making a buzz. All right, so if I just turn off the sound, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the liberty giving it a little whack with a block of wood and a hammer, and this can sometimes just take care of that fret where it needs to be taken care of. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it like. Actually, I'm going to do it with that one off the edge as well. So I can see which one it is that I want to hit, and I'm going to support it right there, and I'm going to go sharp little bash. Now I just want to try and seat that down a tiny bit more. Nearly. Alternatively, if I have to, I'll raise the action down here, which is actually very low, so I can really afford to do that, which is good. So let's just tiny bit up with that action. We'll do a tiny bit more on the others, just balance it out. I'm doing this by eye because it's very familiar for me to balance them out that way. Get the things to move. Okay. So 1.5 there, 1.5 there, 1.5 there, 1.5 there, a bit under 1.5 there. So that isn't a million miles away from my usual or a very good low action, but it's not, obviously, it's not as good as it can be, and to get it any better, we'd have to fret level. So I'm going to just retune in a minute. Going to do any more attempting to do anything with that particular fret. The last thing I'm going to do, now we know it works, at the end of the thing is we're just going to set the intonation, and that's important as a final step. We're just about on the mark of 2 hours, so what I'm going to do is the final bit, set the intonation, and that is pretty good where I've put it. Short, that one, so we'll pull back a little bit. So where I positioned it myself was fairly on the mark, fairly well on the mark, so we're almost there just by experience of using how the strings end up, or the saddles end up when it's intonated properly. We are done, right on the 2 hour mark. There's one tiny little thing I'm going to do because I'm like that, and I'm just going to try and just take a tiny bit off the sharp edge of that nut, because it's a little bit sharp on the to touch. It doesn't have to be, no reason for it, and also on the back side of that as well. Anything to round it off, and the same on here. These plastic nuts feel like cutting cheese sometimes. It's a funny material. There we go. done.